Welcome back to Barkin' Brains, the explainer where a German Shepherd breaks down American civics better than most Americans. I'm Maple. 4 legs, 1 constitution, and absolutely zero patience for people who casually throw around the word democracy like they've actually read the document it allegedly appears in. Today, we're heading back to 1787. We're talking powdered wigs, no indoor plumbing, and 13 colonies of deeply opinionated men trying to build a country that wouldn't immediately collapse into a monarchy or a screaming mob. Honestly, relatable energy.
So here's a fact that will absolutely ruin every dinner party you attend. Out of the 7,591 words that make up the supreme law of the land, take a wild guess at how many times the core concept we always hear about actually appears. Go ahead, think of a number. And keep in mind, this includes the original text and all 27 amendments passed over the last 237 years.
0. Not a single time. Not in a footnote, not hidden in the margins. It is completely gone. And spoiler alert, it appears exactly 0 times in the Declaration of Independence, too.
To put that into perspective, when you stack the U.S. Constitution up against the Chinese Constitution, the contrast is just wild. The much newer Chinese Constitution uses the word democracy 14 times. So if this were just a vocabulary contest, the score would literally be 14-0.
Which brings up a completely valid question. You really have to wonder, did the framers simply have a few too many at the local tavern and completely forget to write it down? Or were they just distracted?
Well, they actually were massive drinkers. Just look at this astonishing tavern tab for 55 delegates on a single night in Philadelphia. This is a real historical receipt from a farewell dinner for George Washington. We're talking 54 bottles of Madeira, 60 bottles of claret, massive amounts of porter, whiskey, cider, beer, and 7 huge bowls of spiked punch. The tavern even billed them for a whole lot of broken glasses and decanters.
I mean, they were practically fueled by alcohol. John Adams literally considered hard cider a breakfast food. George Washington went on to run one of the biggest whiskey distilleries in the country. Thomas Jefferson had a 20,000-bottle wine cellar. James Madison supposedly drank a pint of whiskey a day. And Benjamin Franklin wrote the Drinker's Dictionary and basically drank himself into gout in Paris just to secure French military aid. But despite all of this, their omission of our missing word absolutely wasn't a drunken typo. The crucial point here is that leaving out this word was a deeply intentional, calculated choice. The framers, Madison, Hamilton, Franklin, the usual suspects, they didn't forget the word democracy. They actively rejected it. They sat in Philadelphia for 4 sweaty months and deliberately built something entirely different. Let's get something straight before the comment section implodes. The framers weren't anti-people, they were anti-stupid outcomes, and they genuinely did not trust pure democracy.
Instead, they explicitly guaranteed every state a republican form of government. They had studied enough history to know that pure democracy, which means direct majority rule with no filters and no breaks, had a remarkably consistent track record of ending badly. From Athens to Rome, the pattern was clear. Give unlimited power directly to a crowd, and eventually the crowd votes to seize a minority's property and appoint a strongman who promises to fix everything.
And they witnessed firsthand just how fast crowds turned chaotic. Back in 1776, celebratory crowds in Boston and New York were fueled by alcohol and immediately escalated into tearing down statues and beheading effigies of King George. But the real wake-up call was Shays' Rebellion in 1787. Indebted, desperate farmers in Massachusetts actually took up arms and attacked federal armories. The framers saw in real time how quickly a frustrated public could become a very dangerous armed mob.
They believed that even a room full of philosophers would devolve into chaos. James Madison, basically the framers' nerd-in-chief, called pure democracy a system prone to the violence of faction. Translation: mob rule dressed in voting booths. He wasn't wrong. A sentiment perfectly captured in Federalist number 55. Even if everyone is as brilliant as Socrates, put them in a massive democratic assembly and it still becomes a mob.
They recognized the terrifying concept of the tyranny of the majority. Think about it like this. If you have 100 people and 99 are poor and 1 is rich, pure democracy says the 99 can simply hold a legal vote to seize the one person's property, or worse, their life. The democratic process is followed perfectly, majority rules, but it yields completely disastrous and unjust outcomes for the minority. Democracy, historically, was just a runway to tyranny. The founders realized they had to design a system that protected against 2 enemies simultaneously. It was a brilliantly elegant dual defense strategy. Guard against the king or the tyrant from above, and guard against the mob from below.
Too much centralized power? Tyranny. Too much direct popular power? Anarchy, and then tyranny. To survive, they engineered the Constitution to be a cage, keeping both of those wild beasts locked away through incredibly careful structure. The Republic sits deliberately in between, messy, slow, frustrating, and specifically engineered that way. Which is why it's pretty embarrassing when politicians on any side scream this is a democracy as justification for whatever they want. No, there are limits. The Constitution really doesn't care about your approval rating.
So what did they build instead? They installed strict guardrails to filter public passion. 3 branches, separated powers, an elected legislature, not a direct one. They added an electoral college as a buffer. They created an insulated judiciary with lifetime appointments so judges could say no even when the majority loves a law. And originally, the Senate wasn't even elected by the public. They designed the Senate to slow things down because slow is sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and catastrophe.
They also added the Bill of Rights, which exists specifically to protect individuals from the majority. This is the part people consistently forget. Rights in America aren't granted by popular vote. They are protected from popular vote. Your freedom of speech doesn't disappear if 51% of people find you annoying. That's not a bug. That is the entire architecture. They intentionally took these things completely off the table.
Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson famously hit the nail on the head during World War II. He ruled that your core freedoms do not take requests from the voting public. They placed our most basic human liberties completely out of reach of both the government and the ballot box. Madison would be smug about it, and honestly, he deserves to be.
And their ultimate safeguard was the process of changing the rules. To change the Constitution, you don't just need a simple majority. You need a supermajority in Congress, and then an overwhelming 3/4 of all states to agree. Today, that means 38 out of 50 states. This incredibly high bar was built to stop sudden emotional political tides from destroying the very foundation of the country.
Now, while this structure was initially built by elites, often property-owning men, the absolute brilliance of this system is how it evolved. It's this very structure that everyday citizens, minorities, and marginalized groups leveraged in the courts over the next 250 years to elevate themselves to equal standing. When their rights were trampled by the majority, they used the Constitution as a shield to force the nation to live up to its ideals. When Benjamin Franklin walked out of that sweaty convention in Philadelphia, a woman asked what kind of government they had created. His historic reply was a challenge to all of us. A republic, if you can keep it. Does the system work perfectly? Obviously not. It's run by humans. But the bones are extraordinary.
So that's a wrap, citizens. The Constitution is not a democracy manual. It is a carefully engineered restraint system for human ambition. Enormous unconditional credit to my producer, FireflyHaku, who, much like the constitutional republic itself, operates through careful structure, balanced power, and the wisdom to know that not every impulse should go straight to a public vote. The checks and balances of this explainer are Haku. I'm just the loud branch. If you're learning things here that your high school civics class skipped, subscribe. Free. No electoral college required. Leave a review, tell a friend, share this explainer. My producer tracks engagement with the intensity of a Federalist co-author, and I track it in treats. To my loyal listeners, read the Constitution. It's shorter than you think and will ruin about 17 things you believed before. Stay curious, stay sarcastic, and remember, the mob doesn't always get a vote.